if you're going to ignore your anger and your depression or whatever that's there, and the harder you push it down, the stronger it's going to come up. So I feel like that's kind of what's been happening, and we've just been like ignoring and pushing away and trying to like ignore and like over, spiritually bypass stuff. And now it's like, no, the floodgates are open. So
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. Super excited for today's conversation. We have Tania Gonzalez-Ortega. She's a new earth healer and visionary. Tania, thank you so much for being here today.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited. So let's start off with just talking like a little bit about your journey. Like
Yeah.
when and I'll just preference this and say when people hear us talk about New Earth, they're like, "How did you even arrive at New Earth stuff?"
Yeah.
So it's a common question. So I'll pass that off to you. How did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, I would say that in my early 20s, like 19, 20, 21, I was really questioning reality. Like, I don't know if it was like existential angst or, just kind of like there has to be more to life than what's being presented. And I started meditating on my own and was really just drawn to non-duality, teachings by, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name completely. Oh, Alan Watts, um, Eastern mysticism, started getting into reading the lives of saints and things like this. And I started having interesting experiences in meditation where in the very beginning it was like there would be moments of no thought, like absolute, like the mind just stopping completely, like, and the amount of peace that was there in that experience was just like, whoa, like what is this? And it was just, yeah, it was beautiful. And so I, yeah, was really strongly drawn towards the yogic path. So I got into a yoga teacher training. It was an intensive training in Canada. And at that training, I had a Kundalini awakening experience. At the time, I didn't realize that's what had happened. And it actually, and I didn't have the blissful kind. It was definitely like really rocked my world because it was so intense that it just kind of blew everything open, and I had no roadmap. And so, but what it revealed to me was this the reality that there are many dimensions, and there are many there's more to us than what we've been taught. And so I started having experiences like being able to hear other people's thoughts, and experiences with other beings, and astral travel, and telepathy, and just crazy, past life remembrances. And so, because it was a dark night of the soul, it really was this intense healing journey. And ultimately, it was all about surrender. Like, ultimately, the biggest surrender was that I had to completely let go of my life. So while I was going through all these intense experiences, and my body was really struggling physically, I sought alternative methods to healing. So Reiki was the first thing that I came across, and that actually really helped a lot. But what actually resolved it all was just this deep surrender to God, whatever you want to call it. I just kind of said, okay, I give up. Because I was trying, acupuncture and meditation and prayer and even exercise and cleanses and whatever, and none of it was really helping until I let myself, yeah, give up total control. And then everything resolved. And it was that's when the bliss came in. That's when it was like, oh, wow, I'm connected to everything. And I feel so much love, and so much love for life, and really held. And and then I kind of fell back into what I call like the Maya of life, back into
Hmm.
sort of
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I've got more karma to deal with. you know? And um, so yeah, that's what kind of led me to this questioning of what is our reality, what is energy, what's really going on here. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Beautiful. I love that. I love the journey. And there's no right or wrong way to have this type of journey, people. So if you're listening, you're like, mine wasn't like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We all get them in different flavors. There's no way to predict it. There's no way to plan it. That's the whole point. That's why Tanya was talking about letting go and surrendering and just yeah, basically just surrendering. It's that simple and challenging all in the same breath. I want to talk about a few things before we move on. Kundalini awakening. What is that? And and how would you describe yours? You said it wasn't blissful, but how else would you describe it?
yeah. How so? You know, Kundalini is this energy that lives at the base of the spine. Everybody has it. It's dormant until it is awakened, and it can spontaneously awaken through various means. I've spoken to someone where it happened in her capoeira practice, her Kundalini awakened. Another person was through like an extreme cold experience, like submersion in like an ice cold water type thing that like woke up the Kundalini.
Wow.
Um, for me, it was through yoga and meditation. And for others, it can be literally just you could be laying down, taking a nap, and suddenly it just decides to awaken. It really is, you can't, there's no formula like, oh, do A, B, and C, and then you'll have an awakening experience. It really is, I think it really determines on the one person's, your personal karma. Like if it's meant to happen, it will. And yeah, there's no way to detect. And so for me, I had a very strong desire for enlightenment. You know, I was like, when I was hearing the teachings of yoga and going through this yoga training, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I'm here for. I want to be awakened. I want eternal internal peace. And anyway, they gave me a mantra, and basically it's like, well, repeat this mantra and you're good to go. And so I was like, okay, great. So I went off on my own during the training. I think it was like a week before it ended. And they had this like geodesic dome yurt type of thing. And there was nobody there. And so I just went in. They called it the Peace Hut. And so I went in and I started practicing my mantra, which was Om Namo Narayanaya. And they said, focus on the third eye and just repeat the mantra. And so I was very, very focused and I was repeating the mantra. I don't know how long I was there, I can't remember. But the way it felt was I felt my body getting lighter and lighter. It almost felt like I was floating. And then this light, from within, this light like just started to fill my body. And I was like going higher and higher. I could feel myself. I wasn't physically floating, but it felt like maybe my astral body or something was going higher and higher and higher. And I remember in my mind thinking, I was like, yes, this is it. I'm on my way. Like, like I'm going to awaken, I'm going to enlighten. And then this loud lion's roar from inside my brain, just like, if you can imagine a lion growling, like right next to your ear, that's what it felt like. And I was like,
Okay.
like freaked out, of course, because I was like, none of my meditations ever felt like that, or I never heard anything like that. And so I just shut it down. I just completely stopped the meditation. Um, and So yeah, it was really interesting. That was the experience. And then after that, that's just when all of my physical body started to have crazy symptoms. Like I lost a lot of weight, my hair was falling out, my digestive system was totally wrecked.
Oh.
Yeah, like really. yeah, difficult. And I was healthy, completely healthy before. I never had physical issues in my life, really, other than your typical like flus and colds and whatever. Um, so yeah, it was scary because I didn't understand what was happening to me, you know. So it was a wild, wild ride, and that's when, like, you know, I'd go to sleep, I'd have these out of body astral travel experiences. I would feel my body felt like it felt like I was being electrocuted, essentially. It was like
Mm-hmm.
intense electricity, you know, would come
Mm-hmm.
over my body. Um, I would just have kind of random experiences. I began to understand over time that when the that electrical feeling would come, it would always happen during sleep. It would come, that if I would just allow myself to surrender to it, like, okay, there's nothing to fear. In the beginning, there was fear, you know, because it was not in my control. When I learned to surrender over time, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go on an astral travel. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm just going to surrender myself to the experience. And so I would go into other dimensions, and it was interesting, you know. But yeah, so that was the experience, the moment of the Kundalini awakening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's because again, we all have so many different stories,
Yeah.
and it also seems like a bit mysterious, you know, if someone hasn't had a Kundalini awakening yet, they're like, wait, I still don't understand, like, what's going on? And then I'll just preface this and say, some people, for anyone listening, some people have a Kundalini awakening in stages. It doesn't happen all at once for everyone. So again, just honor your own journey. You don't have to compare it to Tanya's or
Yeah.
anyone else's. And that the symptoms, right? The symptoms can come, and that's it's a byproduct or cause and effect, if you will, consequence of our vibration rising and that dormant energy awakening. And there's a
Hmm.
lot going on in the body when that happens, and in the consciousness, you know. So beautiful stuff. I love that. You also mentioned another common term that people might hear in the conscious community, dark night of the soul. How would you define that?
Yeah, so Dark Night of the Soul, what it felt like is I could not feel life. I don't know how else to describe it other than there was no feeling. There was no, which caused a lot of anxiety. I couldn't, mm, it just felt like a dark veil. Like there was just no energy or movement or breath. And I think for me, what happened, I think because of the experiences that I was having, I have a feeling that part of my soul must have left. I
Mhm.
don't think I was, I think I was off somewhere else just from the trauma
Right.
of the experience. Yeah, so it was deep, deep anxiety, daily anxiety, and severe depression. I think the depression was just that I couldn't feel. I could not feel. And the I was guided to read St. John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul. He wrote about it. And what I found really interesting, it was the only thing that really helped me to kind of hang in there, so to speak, but he basically describes it as a purification process.
Mm.
And um, the only way out of it is really is that it's he says, like, it's up to God. Like, you know, you're not going to pray your way out of this, you're not going to meditate your way out of this. There's literally nothing you can do except to trust at some point it's you're going to come out the other side. So it really was this intense purification process. And when I came out the other side, what I realized, I learned these huge soul lessons, I would say. One was that you don't have to earn God's love or grace.
Mhm.
So my whole life, you know, as a young child, young adult, I felt like, oh, I have to earn love and attention by performing, by being the good student, being the good daughter, being the good sister, you know, pleasing others, getting the straight A's, you know, doing everything perfectly, being talented, all that stuff. And so that dark night of soul, all of that got taken away. Like none of my talents, none of all the things that I had accumulated as part of my identity and ego were gone. And so it was kind of like this, and I think that's why it was a dark night, because it's like, well, who am I without all these? Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm nothing, you know? Um, and so for me, the culmination was really through a kind of miraculous experience through Christ, actually. So when I had that surrender to God, I kind of had this prayer like, okay, God, I'm all yours. Do with me what you will. I'm not going to try to control this thing anymore. I'm not going to try to heal myself. I'm not going to look for more help, you know, whatever. And so, yeah, so realizing that you don't have to do anything to be lovable or to be loved by the divine. That was huge for me. Um, the other thing too was I realized that I had a tremendous amount of spiritual greed. I wanted it all and I wanted it now, you know? I was greedy, I was impatient, you know, I thought that I could make enlightenment happen for me. And and so that was very humbling. So it taught me a lot. So yeah, going through if that I feel like that's what was purified from my being was that. So there is a gift in the dark night of the soul. It doesn't feel like it when you're in it. You really feel like, oh my God, could life get any worse? You know, like what's the point of living if this is what I'm stuck with, right? But it's really true that if you just hang in there, you will pop out the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. What a powerful message. And so now here you are, right? Those were your journeys leading up to where you are now as a new earth paradigm healer and visionary.
Yeah.
Before we get into like the new earth consciousness, what is the old paradigm?
So the old paradigm, I feel like we know it so well. You know, it's basically, you know, the power structure, hierarchical power structure, power over, um, you know, manipulation, um, exploiting Earth's resources and her creatures and human beings for profit and yeah, all of that. And this idea, I think fundamentally the idea that we have to, or at least in the past for eons, we've prescribed to, you know, power over that, you know, the priest knows better, or the king is the ruler, or, you know, this idea of being ruled over. And and that primarily the energetic system that we were operating out of was the electromagnetic. We still have it, but that's why this is what I understand to be true is like, why are so many people awakening now? I mean, it's happening constantly. I mean, I meet so many people, they're like, oh yeah, I've had a
And
Kundalini.
people we would never guess, right?
No,
I just
but
had
you
that
would
experience. I
never.
saw someone's Facebook post last week and I'm like, that person from college, I would have never guessed.
Oh my gosh, no, people that and people having mystical experiences. It's becoming more and more common. So why is this? Why is this happening now versus in the past? I don't think it was as common in the past. And that's because the electromagnetic system was the operating system of our physical bodies, and it's much slower.
Mhm.
And it doesn't hold quite as much light and vibration as the crystalline energy system, which is which is what we have now. Our bodies are becoming more crystalline by nature, rather than you know, being carbon based, and so that's why I think a lot of people are just having spontaneous awakenings. And when you look at the children that are coming in, like, oh my God, they're so awake, you know, they're so just innately wise and very aware. So that's what I would say is the old paradigm, is just that it has a slow, clunky kind of, that transformation has to take a long time, and we have to seek for answers outside of ourselves and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And what is crystalline energy or DNA or however you want to phrase it?
Yeah. So what I was taught by my teacher is the crystalline energy system lives in the water that exists in a gel-like state in our bodies. Um, and so this was new information that I learned from her back in, I guess it was around 2005. And in the years following, I was noticing, how things pop up on the web. And there was some article talking about that scientists have discovered a new state that, we know that water exists as, liquid, gas, ice. Um, and it was talking about this new state that they've discovered, which is this gel-like state. So this gel is in the tissues of our body, and it holds light and information. And so when we are thinking positive thoughts, how we think and how we feel actually affects the molecular structure of the water that's in our bodies. So it's informing, all of our cells, our DNA, how it's all functioning. So yeah, it's this. It processes information much more quickly, and so shifts happen much more quickly. And I think that's why we're seeing this quickening happen, like
Hmm.
time is accelerating. It really, and when I look back at the last 10 years or even the last 3 years, you're just like, oh my God, everything is moving so fast. Things are changing really quickly.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so now shifting into more of our conversation around the new paradigm or new earth consciousness or whatever you want to call it. We talked about what the old paradigm can be described as in just one from your perspective in one of the ways. And how would you also describe the new paradigm or new earth consciousness?
Well, I think the new paradigm, I think we all know it at a very deep level. Like we know that education, the way it's implemented, needs to change. Agriculture, economy, like all the things. And I think the New Earth paradigm, I feel like we can see it in our mind's eye. And we're seeing it kind of pop up, right? Like um, intentional communities, conscious communities, um, using changing our focus towards more sustainable, um, smaller scale businesses, things like that. Just basically a return to nature and coming back to nature's principles, and bringing our technology into alignment with her principles. So I feel like we're going to find more and more just this bridge of science and spirituality coming together. I think that's part of the new earth. I think technology is not something to be rejected. It's here. It's not going to go away, right? So in the right hands, it can definitely help us to really create, a heaven on earth, if that's our will and choice. So that's really kind of what it boils down to, is the free will and choice as the human being, and really realizing like we are the creators of our reality. There's that I would say the old paradigm would want you to believe that there's some kind of power outside of ourselves that's, controlling everything, when the reality is actually no, we actually have the power, um, more than we realize. New ways of healing. I think more and more, modalities, whether they're spiritual technologies, also coupled with, quantum technologies. Like I noticed there's a lot of now there's, these quantum machines that can scan the body and tell you exactly like what's out of alignment and create a little, remedy in a
Mhm.
bottle of water for you to take to have your energy, shift and come back into balance. So I think we're gonna move more towards those holistic ways rather than the pharmaceuticals and the pesticides and the GMOs and the vaccines and all that stuff, and more towards, okay, actually, the we have everything we need right here. Like, we really are created in the image of God, and so we have these, this amazing brain and this amazing body. If we can begin to uncover and remember who we are, then it's we are the ones that are creating the reality. So if we just reclaim that and yeah, using the power of imagination and ingenuity, all of that. So that's what I see.
Lovely. Do you think we're in a consciousness now where we have both existing at the same time, or not so much?
That the old paradigm and the new paradigm existing at the same time.
Uh-huh.
I Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because on the one side, I do have a sense of the old paradigm really being stretched to its limit. Um, I mean, I just see it, for example, with like early childhood education, because that's what I was involved in, right? Like teachers being underpaid and nobody wanting to do the work because it's terribly paid, but then families need the help, but then you need two parents to provide an income. It's like the system itself, it's like being stretched to the max, right? And so what's going to start to crumble? I guess through observation, I think we're at a choice point. Some people say, I've heard some people say, like, oh yeah, the old paradigm, it's already done with. Like the new earth is already here. Um, I know that my teacher often said, like, really, it's just kind of literally, if you were to, it's as easy as seeing the old paradigm to the left and the new paradigm to the right, and just taking a step to the right, for example.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, yeah, I don't know. What do you feel about it? I'm curious to know what you think.
Yeah, well, thank you for your honest thoughts, and I followed your whole, trail of thoughts there. It was
Yeah.
beautiful to just sit with this question. It is a very complex question, probably, right?
Yeah.
Um, I do think that they are both existing here at the same time. I think that's what's causing a lot more, chaos for those who are in tune with the chaos. I'm kind of plugged away from it by choice.
Yeah.
I love the United States. I don't watch the news. If I'm watching TV, it's YouTube, it's spiritual videos, maybe some Spanish channels because I'm trying to learn Spanish. But I think it's here at the same time, and that's why things feel so divisive. And I mean, that's arguable. So someone can literally argue me on that and say, well, things have been divisive for like the last 20 years, which might be true too. But yeah, they're both here at the same time. And and eventually it's almost like a scale. This is how I see it when I meditate or when I'm inquiring, with the universe, just for my own updates, just so I can energetically stay connected to the collective, even though I'm not tracking the 3D chaos on TV screens or anything like that. But I see it kind of like almost even right now, these two scales. And
Mhm.
then eventually just one, the new paradigm is going to kind of hold more weight, and it's going to kind of anchor in more. That's my lower hand, anchoring in more. And then the old paradigm is going to just kind of shift and lose its power. You would
Yeah.
think it's the other way, but this is kind of just how I started to see it again when I'm meditating with that. And very interesting, right? Very interesting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I think it really boils down to like the individual. I think it's really about making that conscious choice to really choose, like, yeah, I'm not going to walk down that path anymore. As as much as it might be tempting, right? Like, yeah, having like lots of money, that sounds great, right? I mean, who's nobody would question that, right? But it's really about, well, but through what means? And I think that's the issue, is that um, I think a lot of people end up kind of selling their soul, so to speak, in order to have the money or the fame or the power or the comforts, right? It's very materialistic. And so I think we get to have that what do you call it? Kind of like I'm blanking on the word, but it's a moment of really deep reflection and contemplation of, okay, what is the life that I really want to create? What's actually really important? You know, the family, you know, cultivating conscious partnerships. Um, what's my relationship to the earth? Like, how, what am I consuming? You know, all those questions I think matter. And I think the more we decide, we have a choice. Are you going to choose this or that? Because the new earth, it's not like it's planned out for us. I think that's the thing, is that it's it's a blank slate. So there is no clear designated path that's laid out before us, right? It's whereas I think in the past, like I think of like the 1950s, for example. Oh, you just get married, you get a good job, you have kids, like that was the path that was kind of laid out. And now it's kind of like it's opened up for whatever it is that you want to create. So in a way, we're kind of walking in the dark towards trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to recreate this? Because there are challenges. I mean, when I feel like I've always chosen the less traveled path. You know, I became more of a
Mhm.
teacher. I decided to homeschool my kids. We homesteaded for a while. We have a farm, and and that's the thing. It's like, yeah, that all sounds really groovy, right? It's hard work. You know, it's hard work. And so it really takes a dedication and a devotion, I think. If we're wanting to call in the new earth, um, then I think we really have to decide, are we really devoted to that? Because I think it's gonna take 100% devotion, even when it gets hard, you know? So,
Beautiful perspective.
yeah.
Beautiful perspective. Yeah. And and with that too, I do agree. It does come down to the individual. Like you do create your personal reality. You know, that's why it's personality, personal reality. You create that. So if you're one of those people, you're like, man, I don't feel the new earth. I don't feel this new paradigm at all. It's all old. It's all, the abuse of power, like the greed at the expense of someone else's quality of life, like all of those things. If that's all you see in the world, in your environment, it's valid, because the old paradigm is here still, but also there are things that you could do as an individual to start expanding your awareness, shifting your environment, being around different people, going into different communities. And that's why I feel like these are happening at the same time, is because there's so many pockets of communities and people who are coming together, and in that community it might be like more of a whole different vibration than what's happening on in the rest of the world, and you have so many of those happening on these micro influences. It's like, again, I believe it's all kind of happening at the same time, and then one day one is just going to become more obvious than the other, because it's like we've been working underground, so to speak. All of
Mhm.
these soul-led businesses, all these soul entrepreneurs, a lot of, I mean, we're, a lot of us are, playing our role in healing. We're not doctors, but we're doing it from a different perspective. We're doing it from an energetic perspective, or whatever it is, and and that's coexisting with the old paradigm, someone's doctor who's telling them nothing's wrong with them and just take this Xanax or whatever, and just kind of throwing medication at them. All of that is still happening while we have these other options and movements coexisting at the same time. So really interesting stuff. I love this.
So all of it is a reflection of us. And so being willing to face the darkness essentially, and to not judge it. So I think that's the other thing. It's like it's really easy to say, okay, old paradigm, that's that's evil. That just, that's creating the polarity. So, and I don't have the answers to that other than, once you're able to recognize the darkness within yourself without judging it, that's when you can transmute it. But as long as we're like rejecting it and saying, oh, that's bad, even if there's something inside of yourself that you're pushing away, like, oh, that's disturbing or whatever, I'm not going to face that, then it's adding power to that. So I think there's a way to collapse that. So it's interesting because when you think about the old paradigm, there's this, people are saying, they're talking about reptilians and like true evil, like running the planet. Um, and that's something that I'm kind of still sort of trying to wrap my head around of when you look at the old paradigm and you're looking at the real deep darkness of, the power over and, things that are happening to children, and it's like, the slave trade of, human beings and sex trafficking and all of that that's happening. Um, I think that I think that's the other reason why it's so, all of that darkness is coming up so strongly in our face, is because the light is getting brighter. So that's the other thing too. Oh, you think that being in the light just means like, oh, I just get to be in the light. No, if you are a light worker, you're going into the dark to illuminate the darkness. And so I think that's the other thing that's really happening. And I think the important thing is to really to stay calm. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, there's all this stuff that's just bubbling up from the underbelly of everything. And to me, it's just kind of a sign of like, yeah, the light is coming in. Like the truth, I mean, bottom line is like the truth always wins. Like love wins. Truth always reveals. Um, things don't, you can't, things can only be suppressed for so long,
Mhm.
right? It's like the dark night of the soul. Like if you're going to ignore your anger and your depression or whatever that's there, and the harder you push it down, the stronger it's going to come up. So I feel like that's kind of what's been happening, and we've just been like ignoring and pushing away and trying to like just ignore and like over, spiritually bypass stuff. And now it's like, no, the floodgates are open. So
Yeah, yeah. And that brings us back to the individual. It's so important for us to, focus on our heart, our desires, our experience, our connection with source, with God, with the universe, and our connection to ourselves and the people around us. Just starting there. And now I want to shift into I know we don't have much time, but a little bit more about the work that you do. What are some of the ways that you help people, connect with themselves or source or their ancestry or whatever it is?
yeah, so I do family constellations, and that modality or therapy can be applied in a lot of different ways. I really feel like there's nothing that it cannot address because it works with the knowing field, or I guess the other word for it would be like the morphogenic field, is
Hmm.
field of consciousness, right? And so when if we're dealing with a certain issue, if you're dealing with trauma or some kind of block in your life, whether it's relationship or finances or just different aspects of your personality that you feel like that are holding you back from creating the life that you really desire. Oftentimes, there's something in your lineage that you've inherited that is coming up now for it to be healed. So um, I always say, like, your triggers are your treasures, like if there's
Yeah.
something going on, it's like, well, it's in your face right now because it wants to be seen and it wants to be healed. And we what we don't realize is that most of those experiences, whether it's like low self-esteem or depression or um, whatever it is, self-sabotage, it's been learned or it's been programmed into us through either our family of origin stuff or through our ancestors. And so oftentimes in the lineage, there's just traumas that are there that are unresolved and unacknowledged. And so through the work I do, um, we can actually tap into that and see where did it start, and then through healing sentences, through interacting and seeing what's showing up in the moment, that stuff can be released. And so because it happens at the soul level, there's an energetic shift within your being. And so from that point onward, just again, it's like when you shift from within, your reality, external reality also shifts, right? So that's one way, and the other way is just through I do energy healing through things that I've studied, and mostly it's a certain protocol spoken protocol along with light language. So light languages is another cool thing. I don't know how many of you out there listening have had that experience, but for me, it started coming online about 10 years ago. I had like spontaneously showed up while I was like doing Reiki on myself as I'm lying down,
Mm.
and just like, this other language coming through my mouth going like, what was that?
Right.
Yeah, pretty
Mine
wild.
came through during COVID. Just
Really?
my
Yeah,
1 hour COVID meditations turned into a light language session. I'm like, what is going on?
like crazy. And I also saw like even the written form of it. I remember seeing
Mm.
it like come into
Ah,
my
yeah.
like core column of light. I was like, oh, because I've seen them. That's what I love, is like when you have these experiences and then you kind of they start showing up in your field. Like when I started having the light language happen, I don't even know how I came across it. Like there's Facebook groups of like light language, right? Like people
Mhm.
practicing light language, and even the written form. I had never experienced the written form until actually this earlier this year. I saw it from within. I was like, oh, that looks exactly like what all these other people are, writing and showing. So it's really fascinating. I mean, it's I think over time it's just going to become more common, like people are going to just have their gifts fully online, and which opens up to different levels of creativity, I think. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. And thank you for the work that you do. And for anyone listening, you know, uh being activated in these types of ways that Tanya's talking about. And there's so many other, modalities that we're not talking about today that are just as valid, just as powerful. But the point here is when you like intentionally just explore yourself, it doesn't even have to be like about quote unquote healing. It could be like that if you resonate with it. But for some of us, we're like, I'm integrating, I don't feel like I'm broken. I don't feel like I need healing, whichever way your perspective is, self-exploration and even exploring your lineage to see what's there and just opening up your awareness. Like this is also how we shift into this new paradigm, because then you'll be able to like show up differently and see things differently. You'll be able to see the difference between the old paradigm and the new paradigm and make your choice accordingly. So thank you for the work you do. It's so powerful. How can people find you? You have all your information will be in the show notes, but do you have one quick link?
Newearthconsciousness.com. That's the easiest.
Beautiful. And any other quotes or last suggestions?
suggestions. I really like that you brought up just the inner exploration part. I think that's really important because we can get trapped in this thinking that we have to always be healing something. And I don't, that can be a rabbit hole that you can just go on forever thinking that you're
Mhm.
broken. You're not. And it's really just being curious about who you are. Like, who am I? Just ask the question, who am I? Go within, see what's revealed to you. Because if you ask, it'll show up. Like you'll start to have new awarenesses about who you are and what's possible. So yeah, definitely.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you for highlighting that. It's a powerful statement. It's a powerful concept of just self-exploration. It doesn't always have to be about healing, although it could be, either way.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. And thank you, Tanya. It's been a pleasure.